Hey guys, Aaron from Golf Custom here. I'm doing a video today about what I think is a simple, cheap, and often underappreciated hand tool for metalworking, and that is the hacksaw. So there's three main parts to a hacksaw we're going to talk about: the frame, the blade, and then the technique. There's a couple of main things that you need to look at when buying a frame, and the first one is it well made? I prefer to buy frames made of steel rather than those made of aluminum because I think that they're a bit more hard wearing. Number two, is it lightweight? Some of the steel frames can be quite heavy and they can actually tire you out more than the cutting action itself will, so I'd recommend trying to get a light one. The next thing that you need to worry about is what is the length of the frame. And a lot of saws, such as this one, are actually adjustable between 10 inches and 12 inches. That's great, but if you only have a choice of one or the other, go for a 10-inch frame. I think that they are a bit stiffer in the blade, and they're also shorter, which means that they're slightly lighter. A last consideration is whether or not the frame has a second pair of mounting pins for doing 45-degree angle cuts. And basically this lets you hold the saw on 45 degrees but still cut straight downward so that you can do long cuts, rather than just being restricted to the depth of the inside of the frame. So the next thing we need to think about is the blade of the hacksaw. And there are three main things that you need to consider when buying blades. The first thing is what type of metal it's made out of. Cheap hacksaw blades are made from high carbon steel, which is what knives would generally be made out of. It works quite well, but it's not heat resistant, and there's a lot of heat that's generated in the cut, which means that the teeth will get dull quite quickly. So the blades that last longer are made of what they call bimetal, and that means that the teeth will be made of high-speed steel, and then they'll be bonded onto a back of spring steel, which keeps the cost down while also making sure that the blade will last longer. The second thing that you need to consider is the length of the blade. If you have a 10-inch frame, you need to get a blade that suits it, which means you need to get a 10-inch blade. The third thing, and the most important thing in a lot of cases, is the number of teeth per inch. Basically, the more teeth per inch, the thinner material you can cut. So if you need to cut a big 1-inch block of steel, then you want the lowest number of teeth per inch possible because that'll let you take the biggest cuts per tooth. There are three main types of blades: 18 teeth per inch, 24 teeth per inch, and 32 teeth per inch. 18 teeth per inch, the minimum thickness of material is 5/32 of an inch, or 4 millimeters. 24 teeth per inch, the minimum thickness is 1/8 of an inch, or 3 millimeters roughly. And for 32 teeth per inch, the minimum thickness is 3/32, or roughly 2.5 millimeters. So if you're cutting thin sheet stock, then you need to try and make sure that you get a 32 teeth per inch blade. So the last thing we're going to talk about with the hacksaw is technique for actually using it. There's a couple of things that are important to know. The first one is that the teeth on the hacksaw are only cut in the forward stroke, the push stroke. So that means that when you're actually making a cut, you want to apply downward pressure on the push, and then you want to let up the pressure when you're drawing it back. Applying pressure when you're drawing back doesn't cut any more material, and all it will actually do is dull the teeth off. So that's an important part of your technique for making sure that your blades last as long as possible. The second thing is how you actually hold it. When I'm starting the cut, I like to have my rear hand in a pistol grip with my finger pointing along the blade, and then my front hand on the front of the frame in order to put more downward pressure and stop it from wandering while you're starting the cut. Once I start going, I generally move both hands to the back of the frame so that I can apply more downwards pressure in the push stroke. The third part, and this is something that a lot of people don't think about, but it's actually quite important, is work holding. Holding the material that you're going to cut. If the material that you're cutting moves at all, or if your workbench moves at all while you're sawing, then that's all wasted energy. It means that your cut's going to take longer, and also that there's a higher possibility of the saw jamming in the cut because the work's moving away from you. So whenever I'm cutting something with a hacksaw, I always try to use my vise, which is mounted very sturdily to a bench. If you don't have a vise, I recommend buying one if you can spare the money. If you can't spare the money, then make sure that you get some good clamps and use those to secure your work very firmly to a sturdy bench. So when you're taking a cut, If the cut starts wandering away from where you want it to cut, then you can actually correct by turning the frame one side to the other and twisting the blade. It's kind of flexible. And when you twist the blade, basically you're putting more pressure on that side of the blade when it's cutting, and it's going to start cutting in the opposite direction. So if you twist the frame left, it'll start moving to the right. Alright, so now that we've got all that sorted out, we're going to take a few cuts so that you can see exactly what my technique is and the kind of stuff that I do with my hacksaw in the shop. Before you use your hacksaw for the first time, make sure that the blade is well tensioned. A loose blade could cause breakages or excess wear. Before you start any cutting operation with the hacksaw, you need to make sure that your workpiece is firmly held as close as possible to the cut. This will minimize the amount of energy wasted by chatter. It's also a good idea to apply just a little oil to the sides of the hacksaw blade. This will reduce the amount of friction and make sawing easier. The steel that I'm cutting here is 5/32 of an inch thick 01 tool steel. It's 1.5 inches wide, but you can see that a good hacksaw and proper technique make short work of it. Here I'm demonstrating how you can use the 45-degree blade mounts on a frame to make cuts that most people probably think would be far too much for the humble hacksaw. The frame is angled at 45 degrees while the blade is still vertical. This allows you to make deep cuts without the frame getting in the way. Here I'm cutting a strip off a 6-inch wide, 3/8 thick piece of aluminum. This cut took around 5 minutes, which when you think about it is actually not too bad for a humble hacksaw.